Welcome to the Real Estate, Fitness, and Nutrition Podcast. I am your host, Heather Ford.
And I'm Chuck Ford, and we are the Constantly Varied Living YouTube channel. And we're super happy to have you guys with us today.
This show is about the things we do best, real estate, fitness, and nutrition. Today, we are talking to you about our nutrition background.
Yeah, and we're going to give our stories about kind of how we got started in nutrition, if you call it that, back in the day, all the way back. So Heather, you want to go first?
Yeah, so mine's kind of a long story. The way that we grow up eating often carries into adulthood. So whether we develop good habits while we're young or bad habits, we continue with those because they become automatic and we just don't think about them. So that's kind of how, I guess you would say, I operated for a very long time. When I was a kid, my mom certainly tried to get us to eat healthy. But the problem with that was what the world put out, the government, the food pyramid, everything they put out about what healthy eating is was not always accurate. So even to this day, there's so much confusion about, okay, what is healthy, what is not. So that's where my mom, and I'm not blaming my mom for anything, but that's kind of where we faltered, is what we thought was healthy wasn't necessarily healthy. So from the government food pyramid to fad diets to recommendations by things like American Heart Association, and then not to mention the money that is involved in the food industry. So if you think about sodas, processed foods, cereals, bars, cookies, all the snack foods, junk foods, the way they advertise, they show these people on TV and they're eating these products and they look young and healthy. So they make you think, okay, if I eat this way, I can still be healthy, or still look that way, or something like that. So there's misconceptions there, and they're trying to get you to buy those products, even though they know they're not good for you. So back to me, when I was a kid, I was really athletic. I did gymnastics. I was always doing some sort of a sport. I did a lot of choirs and so music and dance and that kind of thing. And I just really enjoyed being outside. I lived in a small town, so I could pretty much run around wherever I wanted to, whenever I wanted to. I worked from the time I was 14 to when I went to college in the summers for my uncle at the Lincoln County Fairgrounds, and we did maintenance. So I was the only girl on the crew almost the whole time I was there, and it was always physical labor. There was always a chore to do, and it was usually moving something heavy or getting down on your hands and knees and pulling up weeds or things like that. So I was probably not considered an unhealthy person until I went to college. So when I went to college, what happens to, the freshman 15? Well, it was like the freshman 40 for me. Because my parents weren't there to guide me or tell me what to do or set rules. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and that had a lot to do with food. So when you're a college student, you have a cafeteria plan, and that cafeteria food is burgers and fries and everything fried, and so I indulged for sure because I thought this is just what college kids do. And what happened was I gained so much weight, I didn't even realize it because I don't remember if I just wasn't looking in the mirror or what, but I gained so much weight that I could no longer fit in my own clothes, and I had to borrow my roommate's. She was a little bit bigger than me, and I had to wear her clothes. Even then, I didn't even really, it didn't even hit me then.
Yeah.
That what was happening. So I just thought, okay, well, this is just what college kid does. I'll be fine. No big deal. But fast forward to my first pregnancy, I was still overweight. and I got gestational diabetes with the pregnancy of my first son. So anyone who may not be familiar, gestational diabetes is very much like type 2 diabetes. It's associated with the placenta. So it can affect your unborn child. It can have consequences like macrosomia, which means a big baby. My son, I don't know if he fit the definition of macrosomia, but he was a bigger baby. Mm-hmm. He was 9 pounds, 8 ounces. And the day before I gave birth to him, I was almost 200 pounds.
Sorry.
and I'm 5'2".
Mm-hmm.
That much weight on my frame is not healthy. So, and you have to imagine the baby was anywhere from 30, 40, maybe even 50 pounds of the baby itself, and then the added fluids and everything like that. So that was maybe 160 to 170 pounds of myself. And that's still a very unhealthy weight for myself. So after I had my first child, luckily I didn't have any other complications other than I had to check my blood sugars 4 to 5 times daily, and I had to count my carbs. So my doctor told me, okay, you have to be under this certain amount of carbs. That's really the first time that I ever started counting or paying attention to the food that I ate. But I was still not eating very healthy. I wasn't counting an apple as a carb. I was counting, okay, how many chips can I have and still be in my carb limit? But it did work. I was able to keep my blood sugars under control during the pregnancy, and it didn't have any major implications on my son. So that was good. And that did spur me to want to be healthier after I had my son.
Your first son?
My first son. He's 14 now, almost 15. So that was 15 years ago. So after I had him, I got into running, which kind of is funny because that's the thing that I think people think of, the first thing that they think of when they're like, okay, I need to get healthy, I should just start running, which is great. Running is awesome. But I went right into it. I didn't really have a plan or a good method or anything like that, but my sister was a runner, and she was a really big support for me getting into it. And we did some 5Ks together, and I did some on my own, and I ended up doing a couple of half marathons. So I wasn't necessarily doing the best thing for myself, but because I put a lot of wear and tear on my body. Mm-hmm. Not that running always does that, but it did for me. But I was starting to get to becoming a healthier version of myself. Let's see what happened after that. With my second son, so my youngest son and my oldest are 2.5 years apart. So by the time I had gotten pregnant with my second son, I was much healthier. I was at a better weight overall, and I didn't have gestational diabetes with him. So that was a huge blessing. And I tried to be very active, of course, with a 2.5-year-old. Mm-hmm. Already. I had to be active when I was pregnant with him. So he was a much easier pregnancy, a much easier birth. And then afterward, I started Beachbody. So I did Shaun T's Insanity. Mm-hmm. And that's when I really started to lose weight, because they had some meal nutrition guidelines that I started to follow. So I was beginning in 2010 or so, I was beginning to pair the two together, a little bit of healthier eating and movement. Right. So that was the very first time in my life that I actually connected the dots. Let's see, what else? Then the bottom fell out. So I got divorced. And it was very high stress time in my life. It's very difficult, probably the most difficult thing I've ever gone through. And I had anxiety and depression, and I was seeing a therapist at that time, which helped with my emotional and mental wellness, but I was not focusing on my physical wellness at all. I was back to eating whatever I wanted. I wasn't really exercising that much, and I ended up gaining weight again. So then as the years went on after my divorce, I started feeling, like I was more settled and things were where they needed to be. So then I started doing Beachbody again. And, at this point you were in my life.
Right.
So we definitely encouraged each other you were living in, first Baltimore and then Denver. So we were together long distance, but we definitely encouraged each other to get back on that path of eating well and moving. So that was definitely helpful. And then when you started CrossFit in 2017, which we've established, I followed right after that. And when I started doing CrossFit, I'm like, all right, I'm all in on the eating. So we did the zone, we did paleo. I did Whole30 right before I started CrossFit, which we'll talk more about. We'll get into more of the nuts and bolts of Whole30 in a separate video, possibly. But Whole30 is just teaching you to eat whole foods.
Right.
And it is considered a fad diet because it eliminates certain foods. Which is not always recommended, but for me, it really taught me what foods I really need to be eating. So my favorite thing about Whole30 is called sex with your pants on food. So that means that even if you use Whole30 ingredients to make a pancake, it's still a pancake.
Right.
Or a paleo cookie is still a cookie.
Right.
Even if you're using the okay ingredients, you're still making it into something that's not a whole food. An apple is a whole food. A chicken breast is a whole food. An almond is a whole food. But if you take almond flour and mix it with unsweetened chocolate chips, that's a cookie. And that's not a whole food. So it didn't necessarily make me stop eating those things. It did for a time. But I did end up realizing, okay, it really shifted my mindset. So that was a huge turning point for me. And then, right after I started CrossFit in 2018, I got really lean. I was down to 126 pounds or so. Now, 4 years later, I sit usually around 137, 135, which is a pretty comfortable weight for me. So that long-winded speech is my history of eating, movement, that has brought me where I am today. So why don't you tell us about your history?
I will. First of all, I've got 17 years on you, so there's kind of not only is there a longer period to talk about, but I also probably have some memory loss, so maybe it'll kind of work out the same. So anyway, a lot of my stories is similar to what Heather had. There's a few differences though. Where you were a healthy kid, I was a chubby kid. I mean, I was a chubby baby. I was a chubby toddler. I just was a chubby kid. I mean, you can go back and look at pictures of me on the baseball team, and you'll see that I was the chubby kid on the team. So had big fat cheeks and love handles and everything. So that was just me. That's how I was when I grew up. So that's kind of the way I was. And I mean, and I grew up in a time, I'm, like I said, 17 years earlier than Heather. So I was, like my nickname was Belly. That's the nickname I had in high school. So I grew up in a time that's a little different than Heather did. And like today, I wouldn't really call it, what's the word I'm looking for, when bullying by any means. It's just the way it was. Teasing, but I mean, these were my best friends and my nickname was Belly. And I still answer that today, happily, because that reminds me of my childhood and it wasn't a bad thing. I was the chubby kid, so they nicknamed me Belly and that's the way I'm referred to today.
But it is still a reminder.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's, and it probably has kind of set some of the thought patterns in my life. But anyway, and I was an active kid too. I played baseball and I played more baseball. And then in the wintertime, I found ways to play baseball. So that was kind of my deal, was playing baseball. But when I was, 12, 13 years old, 14, somewhere in that era, I got a paper route, an old school paper route where you used to sling the bag over your shoulder and walk streets, and I did that for years, like 4 or 5 years. My whole family did. So I was always active. When we threw papers twice a day during Monday through Friday, and then once on Saturday and Sunday. So I would throw papers in the morning, get up, throw papers in the morning, go to school, come home from school, throw papers again at night, and then do my thing. So I was a pretty active kid, but I was still chubby. So, and my mom at the time, she did what she could as a mom in that era, and she fed us and provided what we could eat as opposed to what we could afford. So we would afford what we could, and she would feed us to eat what we can. And some of the things that we would eat are, we'd have like spaghetti and jarred sauce like ragu, and we'd always have garlic bread with it, or we would have pork and beans with hot dogs cut up in it, or we call it pork and beans and weenies. So, and then we'd do like tuna casserole, so we'd have egg noodles with tuna and a white sauce, mushroom, cream and mushroom soup, and our crunch would be
Sounds
potato
pretty
chips.
familiar.
Yeah, so we'd eat corned beef and
that's another name.
Yeah, shit on a shingle from my Navy days. We put that over biscuits, and then for like breakfast we'd eat boxes of cereal. I mean, sugared cereal or unsugared cereal like Wheaties and Cheerios, but then pounded in sugar. We'd put more sugar on there, and we'd eat boxed waffles like Eggos or other varieties, home style waffles. And she'd make oatmeal. We'd have instant oatmeal, not instant in the packet, but oatmeal, 1 minute oats. Right. And then we would add butter and brown sugar and toast to the point where the oats became more of the condiment than the actual meal. So we were pretty good at eating that. One of the things my mom did was she made chocolate chip cookies. She perfected the Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookie recipe, which then she passed on to me, and I've perfected and I'm famous for throughout the country, actually, from different places I've made cookies. People still request them, and I've passed those on to my sons, and they are learning to perfect the same thing. So, but one of the things, and you see, if you're watching YouTube, you can see the shirt I have on. If you're just listening on the radio, I have a shirt on that says, I devoured the Dundee Dozen. So at the E Creamery in Omaha, they have an ice cream shop, and they have a challenge there. And if you can eat 12 scoops of ice cream with 12 toppings on it in under 20 minutes, you get a free t-shirt and your picture on the wall. My picture's still on the wall there. Funny thing was I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it. I didn't go in there to do the challenge, so I'd actually eaten a 3-scoop sundae and discussed it for a while with the person I was with, and said, hey, you think I should do this? And they encouraged me to do it. So after I ate a 3-scoop sundae, then I went up and got 20 scoops of ice cream.
You had a warm-up
sundae before I did the ice cream. So yeah, my E-Creamery shirt's kind of a reminder of a day when I had a little more desire, that I could just eat, and not worry about it. And you mentioned it early on about when we were young and how important that is, and that we form habits. And that's the biggest thing. Habits are habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits. And they're hard to break. They're hard to change. It's hard to start new habits, but it's probably easier to start a new habit than it is to break an old habit.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things, like, for those of you that have young children, it's if you're not satisfied with the way that you were raised, and I'm not upset by any stretch of the imagination with my parents. It was the way that we were taught to eat back then.
Well, you had
pyramid.
two siblings,
right.
A brother and a sister, so a family of 5. That's just what people do. They get what's convenient, what's cheap, and what's going to stretch the longest.
Right.
I mean, I grew up, my family wasn't poor, but we weren't rich either. So that's the way that I was taught to cook. And it's the way I cooked for my sons.
But
for a long time.
You say that what you can afford and what you can stretch. but there's ways to make healthy
Oh,
food
there
stretch
are,
too.
but
That's the
yeah.
important factor
Yeah.
is that you realize that you're going to have to adjust a little bit to eat right, and that's the way we were taught to eat. It was food pyramid stuff and all that stuff that I mentioned, pork and beans and with hot dogs and tuna casserole with chips and spaghetti with meat sauce and things. Where's the vegetable in that? Unless you want to count the beans and potato chips as vegetables.
There's tomatoes in the sauce.
And tomatoes in the sauce. That's, it was a stretch where now in today's world we eat vegetables and we eat a conscious amount of fruits and vegetables and they're whole foods. So anyway, that's kind of my story. I graduated high school. I was still a little overweight. I'm still overweight. Went into the Navy. I was overweight. I was on the programs there. When we deployed, I started to learn about fitness a little bit, and my buddies and I, we'd work out and run. But I never learned about nutrition. Nutrition just never. I ate and drank what I wanted, especially in the Navy. Then, I was of age, and we'd drink beer and eat nachos and work out and run. And at that age, it was better. I'd lose weight and was fine, and then came back to shore duty and was more accessible to the food and drink that I wanted, and I got chubby again, and I was on the overweight programs and had to go to extra PT and things like that. Got out of the Navy, still chubby. Never really focused on my diet until I turned 50. Had, like I discussed in the last video, had that calcium score that was high that indicated I might have some heart issues. Found CrossFit, and CrossFit, again, you can go to the gym, any gym, and get some really good movements at the gym, but CrossFit is as much about nutrition as it is movement.
Yeah.
So that's when I started learning about CrossFit, and then we started Whole30 and the Zone diet, which we'll talk about in a future video. So that's kind of when I started nutrition. So it took me 50 years to learn really anything about nutrition, anything, and really delve into it. So from a training age, I'm really young in that, but I've kind of dove into it head first and learned as much as I can, and we've learned a bunch. So it's kind of where we're at now is where we got there. So what else do we want to talk about? There's some things you wanted to discuss.
So just some things that from all of that. Also, we both have our precision nutrition. We went through that course, level 1 certificate. I've done some nutrition coaching at my gym. So I've learned things, from other people's experiences also.
Speaking of coaching, that's something that down the road we're going to probably offer to everybody if they're interested. Is something we'd like to share with people, not anything more than just trying to help out and offer what we've learned in our experiences and maybe make it easier for somebody else, condense our information into what they can be useful for them. So,
right. Nutrition coaching is really about being a guide, so we stumbled upon all of this by experimenting with different ways of eating, and so we really tested a lot of different things on ourselves. When you have a nutrition coach, you're not in the dark. They have a flashlight for you. So you're not stumbling and falling as much as you would without someone who's there to guide you and keep you accountable. Accountability is a huge thing. But some things that we've learned from all that is just that there's not a one-size-fits-all way of eating.
Right.
There's no magic pill. I don't care how many infomercials you watch, whatever, there is no magic pill. If something works quickly to get you to lose weight, it's not going to last. It's not going to be sustainable. Healthy eating and exercise, developing a routine and being consistent takes time. It's a long game. And we're still working on it. Like I said, I sit comfortably at 135, 137, but I wouldn't mind getting a little bit leaner. I want to look good in a bikini. So we're still going to always be working on ourselves. And to kind of touch on what Heather was saying about her weight, I
have been down as low as somewhere around 190.
I'd like to point out, when you did the Dundee dozen,
Uh-huh.
you were probably at your lowest weight. I think you were around like 190. You were definitely under 200, because I've seen that picture on the wall,
Yeah.
and you were really thin.
But I still thought I could eat, 15 scoops of ice cream in a day. But so I've been around 190. I'm about 5'10", maybe a little shorter now. I used to be 5'10", but that was in an earlier age. But I really feel healthy around 195. I'm about 210 right now. 209, 208, 209 is where I've been for months, which is kind of my balance weight, my set weight. And I'm not obese by any stretch of the imagination. Well, I don't know. Some standards may have me, but I don't feel that way. I move pretty well. I'm 55 years old, or I'm coming up on 55 years old. So, but I'm still looking to lose, maybe 10 more pounds here and there. But it's an effort at this age. It's going to take some more cardio, so as and moving and watching, dialing in what I eat. But we don't overdo things. Very often, and
You bring up a good point about kind of being stuck at that weight. So our bodies do something called, or try to maintain something called homeostasis.
Right.
So when you lose weight or gain weight, your body is trying to figure out, like, oh, how do I get back to where I was? Because we have a set body temperature, body weight, that it's always trying to maintain. So if you're working on a nutrition plan or a meal plan or whatever, a specific macronutrient breakdown, and you're not seeing, you stop seeing results toward your goal, could mean that you need to make a little bit of a change, because your body's gotten used to that, and it's like, okay, I see what you're doing, I'm going to adjust to that then. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to change a lot. Could mean that you need to decrease 100 calories a day, or increase 100 a day, or change your breakdown a little bit more. But that's the thing. If you find something that works, it's not always going to work,
Right.
which could be really frustrating, because but that's just the way it is, especially as you get older. You're gonna have to change things up here and there, so just keep that in mind.
Right.
That if you find a way that you like to eat that works, and you're like, all right, I'm doing it, and it stops, then maybe make an adjustment, or think about making an adjustment. And it's a long game.
It is, yeah. And that's one of the things. That's probably one of the biggest things, and it's hard to believe, but it took me like 4 or 5 years to realize this. We're not going to be swimsuit models. Yeah, you'd like to look in the bikini, and I'd like to go to the pool.
Well,
But we're not going to be swimsuit models. I'm not going to be a CrossFit Games athlete, most likely. I mean, I love it, and I want to participate, and I'm competitive, but I don't have all the tools. And I mean, the likelihood of me being that's about the same as me being on the senior PGA Tour as a 20 handicapper. So, but that's okay. I can still enjoy it. I can still work hard. I can still do all the things, and be, average, which 99% of the population is cut out for that.
yeah.
So those are the things that we want to do. But there are some rewards that are that we can gain, and we won't make, either as nutrition coaches or in this podcast or at any other time, we're not going to make you any guarantees about, if you do this, then this will happen. That's not the way it works. I mean, there's a lot more to it, and there's
so many variables
yeah.
that come into play.
But I can tell you what affects me and what affects us anyway. And in the last 5 years, I've lowered my cholesterol. I've lowered my blood pressure. I've lost a tremendous amount of body fat. I move better, definitely move better.
Yeah.
In over 5 years. I've added 10% of my lifespan in the last 5 years, and I move better at 50, almost 55, than I did at almost 50. So, I sleep really good, and I have more energy every day. And those are things, and those come from mostly changes in my nutrition and moving. So, Greg Glassman said, if you had to make a choice between, he always said, off the carbs, off the couch. That was his thing. If you had to make a choice between exercise and diet, take the diet.
Yeah.
So
where do you get abs?
Where do you get abs in the kitchen?
You make abs in the kitchen. Yeah. You can exercise all you want, but if your nutrition isn't dialed in and you're wanting that 6-pack abs, you're never gonna get it.
And when she says dialed in, we mean like
extremely dialed in.
Extremely dialed in.
There's a huge cost to getting that land.
Uncomfortable, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the people that you see on Instagram, we're not going to be Instagram influencers. We're not. Heather's young and she's twice as old as a lot of influencers. So and she has 2 kids. So it's just.
Yeah, I have really good arms. Yeah. My arms look good. I have big thighs. My stomach is always going to look like I've had 2 kids because I had one of the pregnancies was really traumatic. The other one was less so, but I mean, I've had diastasis recti for 14 years, and I'm finally getting to a point where my core stabilization and midline stability is really good. I've had multiple 2 very serious knee surgeries, and I'm finally at a point where I don't have knee pain every day, and that I can actually squat almost every day. And so those are the huge goals for me, not necessarily how my stomach looks. Because I know how fit I am,
right?
Even if I don't look like a supermodel.
I think that's our overall goal, is to be extraordinarily average.
That's a good way to put
it.
We're super average. It's just like in CrossFit, you scale the workout so that you can achieve it. So super scaled. So, well, that's kind of our nutrition story and where we're at. Again, we're going to have some new things coming up. You may have noticed in the intro that we're no longer the Constantly Varied YouTube channel. We are now the Constantly Varied Living YouTube channel. So we made that change. It's just a minor change. It shouldn't affect anybody. We do want you, if you're watching on YouTube, to like and subscribe. And hit the bell so you get notified when we upload new videos. Yep. And our YouTube channel is going to be dedicated to nutrition. Yep. So we're going to be sharing lots of cool tips and information to help you with your nutrition. That's really going to be the goal with our YouTube channel.
So if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms like the Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google or Amazon, any of those platforms, and you enjoy what we have, you will need to go to YouTube and go to Constantly Varied Living to start seeing our YouTube nutrition videos, which should be coming to you in the next few weeks.
Hopefully soon.
Yep. So, where else can they find us, Heather? Where can we find us?
You can find us on Facebook at The Ford Realtors.
Right.
You can find us on Instagram at Constantly Varied Living. You can also find us at our brokerage website, because we are in real estate, in case you forgot, at www.the1867collective.com.
Yeah. And again, Constantly Varied Living on the YouTube channel. So, all right. I think that should do it for today.
Should do it for now.
Yeah. We just get ready to go finish our day. So, all right.
I love you, Mom. No offense. You're a good mom. Thanks for cooking for me when I was a kid. Kidding, Brad hates us.
Yeah, always.